Solidarity Unionism. So we're going to have 3 people speaking for 3 undergoing campaigns. First Zoe and Butch for the Toronto Harm Reduction Workers Union.
So the Toronto Harm Reduction Workers Union is an organization of harm reduction workers who are united together in solidarity to improve our working conditions and to strengthen equality in the workplace for the betterment of the workers and those who access the services. We are a union of employed and unemployed workers committed to harm reduction. So harm reduction is about reducing the harms associated with drug use, but in our definition, we don't just define harm reduction as just, as reducing those harms exactly. Harm reduction is an evidence-based policy. It's evidence-based and practical approach to dealing with the harms associated with drug use. And harm reduction is any program or policy designed to reduce drug-related harms without requiring the cessation of stopping or using drugs. We are really explicit about this, as a lot of people who claim to be harm reduction workers claim it as more like they say that they believe in it, but they actually see it as a road to abstinence and have their own ideas of what harm reduction is and how that is practiced. And not all of us believe in the same things as workers. So our organization is also about making sure that the commitment to harm reduction is actually real and that those workers who say that they are harm reduction workers are actually doing that in practice. So the type of workers who are involved in the Harm Reduction Workers Union, we're about 65 members over 14 organizations, so we organize cross-organizationally. And the type of work that we're involved in is anywhere from needle exchange programs to doing outreach. I coordinate a hepatitis C program. There are nurses, reception. There are people who are, like we were saying, employed, unemployed, outreach workers, drop-in workers. We have about 45 sites in the city of Toronto that give out needle exchange supplies. So there's actually an opportunity to organize hundreds of workers, and we're not finished what we've started. And so one of the reasons why we started organizing across our organizations was that 40% of workers working in these organizations, 40% of them are working in organizations that are unionized with the trade union and are not in those unions. There is a lot of workers who are working part-time, who are working relief, who are working precariously, and have been actively, in some cases, pushed out of being in the trade unions that are inside those workplaces, which is incredibly shameful. There has been no organizing efforts to bring those folks into traditional unions until we started our organizing effort to actually organize harm reduction workers themselves, which we approached the IWW after we approached a group of us approached other trade unions to just talk about maybe the possibility of organizing across organizations, and there was no interest in working with us. And we actually thought that the IWW and its politics and the way in which they did solidarity unionism and the way in which we already engage in a lot of direct action and illegal shit. Needle exchanges weren't just built one day and people just started doing those. People have been doing a lot of work that's harm reduction based without waiting for government's handouts, without waiting for the state to say it was okay. Needle exchanges started in the 80s in response to the HIV/AIDS crisis. Lots of stuff goes on that people don't know about where drug users are helping each other out, whether it's in their own homes, handing out needle exchange supplies, what have you. Helping people through withdrawal, helping people connect to drugs. We also thought that the IWW wouldn't stigmatize the workers, as many of the workers are people who use drugs. There are workers who actively use drugs. I work in a health center where 120 workers, 34 of them are employed for active drug use. I think that's really important because the stigmatization and the scapegoating of people who use drugs is so incredible, the massive discrimination, that when people find out that you're a person who uses drugs, how badly you're treated. Sorry, I'm talking so fast. Okay, so there was no representation for people, and so we felt so when we met with IWW, we started to build from there. We were really impressed with how the Toronto branch was willing to work with us and was excited about the campaign that we proposed, and we started with a forum in this room where we invited over 100 workers to come here. We did some really cool things to get workers here, and every single worker that came that day was paid for by their workplace. So we made sure everybody who attended got paid to attend the forum, and it was the first time in the history of harm reduction work in the City of Toronto where we talked about work, where we actually talked about work. People did not see themselves as workers. They didn't see themselves as part of the labor movement, and their workplaces still do, to this day, do not see them as workers. So we organized, the first thing we did, we went public in November. Sorry, I get really excited when I'm like, don't lose my thoughts. I got 10 minutes. We went public in November at South Riverdale Community Health Center and Queen West Community Health Center. And we were very excited to go public. At South Riverdale, it was 24 of us signed a letter in our workplace. We signed up, we presented it to our bosses. We said, this is what we're doing. We're in this union. This is what it is. South Riverdale is not an organization that has a union, so they were a bit shocked. But they took it, they talked to us, and they met us, and it went okay. And then Queen West Community Health Center went public, and the union that was there got upset. There was discussions with management, and then the typical stuff that happens, like management and workers talking, workers bailing. It was a real misstep on our part, and unfortunately, I would say it created some fractured relationships within some of the organizing with some of the workers that we still have to work on fixing. We still have members that are at that site, but our organizing is not the same. At South Riverdale Community Health Center, we have an operating workplace committee that's been operating since November. We meet every single month. We've been able to make some gains in the workplace. As soon as we did the forum and started organizing, everyone got a raise. We started challenging around access to the building with fobs and keys. People got fobs. We're still fighting over the access to the building with keys and to people's office spaces. There's still challenges. The type of work that people are doing is incredibly underpaid and undervalued, although there's a lot of lip service to harm reduction work, because harm reduction workers are really the connection to the people who are accessing the services, and they make the work work. But yet, the fact that it's so precarious, that it's not permanent, that there's contracts, that there's, some people get paid in pizza and bus tickets, some people get $10 an hour, there's a reliance on people to be on social assistance, there's no benefits, there's no sick days, there's no mental health days, and a lot of the workers are people who are struggling with living with HIV, Hep C, who are using drugs, who need days to be able to go through withdrawal or have some time off. The people who are incredibly criminalized, and those kinds of things are not taken into consideration in our workplaces. The other challenges that we face is just stuff around poverty, criminalization, discrimination. So we have a whole workforce of people. So you work in your organization, I'm gonna hand it off to Butch in a second. You work in your organization and there is this discrimination that takes place, that other staff in your organization know that you're hired for your lived experience. And so even if it's subtle, it's stuff that just never gets addressed. And that also excludes people from accessing meetings, the parties or functions that happen in the workplace, and so forth. So maybe you could talk a bit about some of the solidarity stuff that's happened.
My name's Butch.
Get closer.
I worked with Zoe for quite some time. I've been a harm reduction worker at South Riverdale for about 9 years. I was hired for my lived experience. At the same time, basically the stigma sometimes around South Riverdale isn't that much. I'm no longer working there. I had to take some time off, basically without any paid time off. I mean, I don't know any workers that can go 9 years without a paid vacation. Anyway, so on my 9th year, I ended up kind of blowing it and had a bit of a breakdown. So right now I'm on a sick leave. I don't think it would have happened with some kind of paid vacation anyways. I ended up getting arrested in a Pan Am game sweep about about 8 months ago. For starters, I don't know what warden in St. Clair had to do with the Pan Am Games where I was arrested. I'm pretty sure there was no Pan Am Games anywhere near warden in St. Clair. But anyways, ended up getting arrested there for a sweep. Had to get the degenerates off the street, apparently, including myself. So it's kind of ironic considering they basically paid me to do what I do. I was also a satellite organizer for South Riverdale, which basically meant I was in charge of 10 houses that distributed paraphernalia to clients from their house that basically shooting galleries, unsanctioned
injection sites.
Injection sites.
Wait for a minute.
Yeah, so anyways, it was pretty ironic that I was paid to do what I was doing, and then they arrest me for what I'm doing. Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to just take 30 seconds, okay? So I think one of the points that we're going to try to make here is just that one of the things, not only just the gains in the workplace, but also just the solidarity that's come from organizing together, where people felt really like detached from one another, and so people have been helping each other through when people have been in the hospital or people have been sick, or helping people, like one of the members in our drive, she was killed while we were organizing in a fire. Another member lost her daughter to it was like a drug-related death. It was, you know, and then just us coming together to actually support people where that didn't happen before. And like in Butch's situation, getting arrested, just getting someone to post bail from the union, where like that might not have happened. We had another member another week later get swept up who also needed bail. And then when our workplaces found out that we were posting bail for each other, we're having a conversation in management about making policies around bail. But I mean, that is something that we would like fight against so hard, because it doesn't matter if I was like fucking my coworker, it's none of your fucking business if I bail out my coworker. And actually that's a harm reduction practice. It's keeping people out of prison, because a lot of people we work with wouldn't have been able to post bail, and over 50% of people in prison are sitting on remand and not able to get bail. So beyond just like the wage increase or the FOB increase, just the massive solidarity that we've been building with each other and people looking out for each other and watching each other's backs has been a really important relationship that we've built by organizing this union and continuing to organize this union, and in the hopes that we organize more people across our sector so we can actually fight for those things like sick days, mental health days, drive for an industry-wide campaign to bring up the wages and to stop this like massive tier in our work that's creating a huge difference in our workplaces. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Prosciento for the Ottawa Panhandlers Union.
Wow, that's good work, guys. Keep that up. My name is Prashanto Smith. I'm with the Ottawa Panhandlers Union. We use the acronym OPU. We were created, we started out as in a response to an abuse of some legislation called the Safe Streets Act. Now, the Safe Streets Act is an act that's basically saying aggressive behavior while asking for money is illegal, or, that begging at, certain areas is also illegal, like to a captive audience. And we just over the years have found that the cops are pretty much abusing this law, arbitrarily giving out tickets to anybody who's basically poor, on the street. Oftentimes we'll, see a little old Inuit lady shaking her cup, and on the ticket that they receive would say aggressive. And it's absurd because, they'll write stuff on my tickets like near a bus stop, near a bank. Now, near a bus stop is not illegal, and near a bank is also not illegal. See, the problem is the pigs don't even know the law, right? When you question a pig and you say, listen, Panhandling is not illegal. The response you'll get is, yes, it is illegal. Because that's what the BIAs are telling them, right? Because the cops and BIAs got a real close connection. They like work together, right? The BIAs only give a shit about yuppies. That's all they care about, right? But the truth is that panhandling in no way discourages people from making purchases from anything. People will still go buy their groceries, they will still buy their alcohol, they will still, whatever they were about to do, they're going to do it. And then oftentimes, you know, they will give change, you know? So the reality is about maybe 1, 2 people that will complain, but the rest don't, you know? But the reason why we needed this union is because it's an issue that people sort of went, well, it's not that important, you know? That this bum, you know, will be treated like shit, you know? And so we started videotaping them. I have my video man here, Chris Brown. You know, we would set the cops up, you know, videotape them being very degrading towards us. And, you know, and also, you know, the way that they behave. Because I think that, you know, I have 101 tickets that I'm dealing with right now. And we're encouraging our members to basically go into City Hall and basically plead innocent, right? To all these tickets, right? Because we want them to have to litigate all of them, right? So, you know, we're hooked up with this group called the TDP in Ottawa. That's the Ticket Defense Program. And they've been very, very helpful in going to court. And actually, I was in court last week on 101 tickets. That's $8,549 that they're not going to get from a guy on ODSP, right? So, I mean, it's just absurd to think that they're going to continue with these laws and maybe even make them worse. Now, the Safe Streets Act, conservatives have this wonderful gift of calling everything the opposite of what it is. So, you know, the Safe Streets Act is actually, like, as a person who's lived 9 years on the street, in a shelter, you know, been pimped by these poverty pimpers for almost half my fucking life, I can tell you the streets are not safer. Downtown now is a bunch of drug users and dealers. Nobody wants to play a drum. Even the buskers, apparently, now have to pay $100 to play. $10 every time they show up. And they were auditioned. So it's no longer, you know, it's been co-opted. It's no longer an activity for, you know, poor people to engage in order to, you know, in order to make money, you know. So any entrepreneurship on the street has been crushed, right? And it's continuing to be crushed by these laws. We asked, you know, City Hall if we could have a safe space to do these things in, and they refused, you know? So I think it's a really important thing. If you get down to the bottom of it, it's freedom of speech, you know? Like, what if you find yourself in a situation where you need to ask somebody for some bus fare? Or, you know what I mean? Whatever, you know? I don't know. I just think I think it's a really important issue that people be able to help one another freely on the street. I even had cops, you know, stand in front of me and tell people not to give to me, or actually even like physically come between people and me. You know, but they've been targeting me, right? Because I'm fairly public about what I'm doing. You know, I want people on the street to notice me. I want them to notice that there are beggars out here. You know. Because a lot of times people just pass by and they don't even acknowledge you, right? So the Panhandlers Union is also a support group, right, for those who beg on the street. We don't care what you use your money for, whatever, you know, but we just want to swap stories about what cops have done, what pigs have done, you know, because it's pretty crazy how some of these, they get on these little crusades, you know. I mean, I was ticketed, what, 4 times in an hour, Chris, that one day? 3 times in an hour? That's pretty obsessive, to receive $380 tickets in an hour, you know? So, I don't know why they're wasting their resources on this. It makes no sense to me. Lastly, I would just like to say that looking forward, you know, our members have given us some good suggestions, such as taking our panhandling money and donating it to a charity of some sort for one day, just to show that panhandlers are not all about themselves, you know. And we've had other suggestions for setting up Cop Watch. If you want to join our Facebook group, it's I Support the Ottawa Panhandlers Union on Facebook. And if you'd like to check out our YouTube site, which is our Cop Watch site, because basically what we're trying to encourage our members to do is videotape any encounter with the police, right? Any encounter at all, so that when we do fight tickets, if worst comes to worst during the litigation, we can pull up these videos and say, well, this is the particular ticket, this is the particular video. You judge for yourself. Was this guy being aggressive? Was he not being aggressive? Right? It's such a loose term, right? So the cops can basically abuse, the law as much as they want. This piece of legislation has got to be changed. I understand the heart of it, why it's there, but there's no compassion. And that's what we have to ask ourselves: is there any compassion in making these anti-homeless laws? Like, is there any compassion in that? And I don't think there is. I think it's all about the business, the business of life, and the stores, them losing a customer, them losing 5 cents. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you very much for having me here. This has been a great conference.
And Nick is going to speak, well,
I'm Travis, but
Nick's going to be over the phone from Twin Cities to speak about the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee.
last panelist, Nick, on the phone here.
Okay, everybody here?
Yep.
All right. So, I'm Nick. I'm from the IWW Twin Cities branch. I've been a member since 2014 and actually joined the union for the purpose of prison organizing, prison labor organizing, and was politicized during the last period of incarceration from 2010 to 2012 in the Minnesota Department of Corrections. So this is definitely some important work to me. And essentially, I don't know how many of y'all know the history of IWOC, but we basically originated as a support group for the Free Alabama movement, which was a strike movement out of the Alabama Department of Corrections at that time, and it became an outside support network for the efforts of those incarcerated people in Alabama, and that was able to be kind of broken up due to some transferring, and they made some tactical mistakes as far as maybe announcing the public strike date so that the administration could get in front of it. And then the majority of the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee inside members are based in Missouri. I think the last number that I heard was we just got about 500 members inside prisons, and the origin of that effort was out of something that was called the Missouri Prison Labor Union, which was a formation of gentlemen inside the Missouri Department of Corrections that actually were doing efforts at organizing themselves, and some of them, the core organizer was getting ready to be released, so they reached out to the IWW, which at the time was the Kansas City General Defense Committee, and basically they passed over their network to the IWW, and they took it on and started signing up members and doing a lot of letter writing and sending in lit and just building membership inside. So that's why the majority of our membership is based in Missouri, because we had an already pre-existing network there that we were able to engage with and pick up, and it started to grow. And also the Department of Corrections of Missouri's efforts to break up the organizing. What they did is they were about 10 organizers, and they transferred them all to different prisons within the state, and they all began organizing at the new prisons that they were transferred to, so they spread the organizing efforts to different prisons. So it actually didn't help the administration at all. It actually spread the union and our scope and our network. Just a couple things and some points I like to make when I'm talking about prison labor to workers on the street, and a connection I think a lot of us don't make is that a lot of jobs the prison industrial complex is one of the biggest industries in the United States. I don't know much about Canada's incarceration rates, but I'd like to make the connection that it's in the interest of these private contractors to get as much of their labor done inside, because there's no minimum wage there. So it's the equivalent of sending work overseas for cheap labor. And essentially what happens is it takes work from workers on the streets because they're going to go where they can get it for the cheapest, which means there's less jobs out here, which means there's more poverty, which effectively increases the crime rate and also increases the prison rate. So the connection between workers in the streets and workers in prison is something I think we need to do a better job on articulating, and just being really clear that even people that haven't been incarcerated, or even people that are not part of the target populations for mass incarceration, are affected by prison issues, and it's a working class issue in general that needs to be addressed. And it's in the interest of the entire working class to fight back against the prison industrial complex, try to bring down the incarceration rate, and eventually, of course, abolish prisons altogether.
Great.